What's up guys, Asian here again with another build video. This time I'm going to be going over the Stamina Nightblade DPS. This is just one of many builds that we have on our guild website, so to keep in mind this is only one of the many possibilities that you can have in terms of gear combination for a Stamina Nightblade DPS. Like the rest of our build videos, we'll be going over gear, skill bars, CP distribution, and top things off with a 3 million dummy parse, and we'll quickly look over our combat metrics report. So starting things off here with our gear. Our monster helm is going to be a Velodreth, both mediums, both in divines. You can use Selines if you want to, but I prefer Velodreths. Our body pieces are all going to be two-fanged snake, again all divines. And for our jewelry we're going to be using Vicious Ophidian, all with weapon damage enchants. You could go with two-fanged snake jewelry and have 3 Vicious Ophidian body parts as well. It all depends on the quality of the jewelry you get. Gold Vicious Ophidian jewelry is easier to find than gold twice-fanged snake jewelry, so that's why we're going with jewelry with Vicious Ophidian versus two-fanged snake. For our front bar we're going to be using 2 daggers of the Vicious Ophidian. If you're going with two-fanged snake, you don't want to have your front bar weapons be two-fanged snake, because if we go back up here, you see that the penetration only increases for 3 seconds and you're going to be on your back bar for longer than that. So when you go back to your bow bar to cast Endless Hail and Poison Injection, you will end up losing that penetration if you have two-fanged snake on your front bar. This is why we have our 5 body pieces or 3 jewelry pieces. We always have our two-fanged snake set bonus up at all times, so we never lose that penetration stack. That's very important to our overall DPS, and losing that is a huge loss. 2 daggers. First one's infused with poison, the other one's sharpened with weapon damage. You can actually go Nirnhone daggers. I've been hearing things that Nirnhone and infused both pull similar DPS, with Nirnhone pulling slightly ahead due to the changes with how the Maelstrom bow works in Clockwork City. You can choose your own poison, whichever one you manage to get first. You'll be able to find infused off drops off bosses. You can only get a Nirnhone dagger if you transmute it, or if you manage to get it off a weekly leaderboard drop from your weekly trials. So go with infused for now. From what I've heard, the difference in DPS is pretty small. It's only about 1k. So unless you're really into min-maxing, infused is the way to go. It's just easier to obtain, but Nirnhone is technically better. As for the offhand, you can also go precise or Nirn again. I prefer to go sharpened for a little bit of extra penetration, so I can keep some points out of piercing and put it elsewhere. For our back bar, we're going to be using the Maelstrom bow. We want this to be in Nirnhoned, or you can go with sharpened. Either one works. You'll see here that we're actually going to be using poisons. Poisons again, just like in Horns of the Reach, are going to be very powerful for stamina DPS. Here we have our double Ravage health poisons. And I'll go over to an alchemy station so you guys can see how to make them. Going to be using Algahest, Blessed Thistle, Fleshfly Larva, and Nightshade, and that's how we're going to be able to get that poison. That's the cheapest combination that I found so far to work. You can get plenty of Fleshfly Larva if you've been doing Skyreach grinding. Blessed Thistle is pretty cheap. The only expensive ingredient here is going to be Nightshade. Prices for Nightshade are typically around 50 gold, but they have jumped due to the changes in Clockwork City, so do keep that in mind when you're searching for Nightshades on Guild Traders. So that's that for gear. For food, we will be using max health, max stamina. All of our points are into stamina. We can see here health on our front bar is 16.7k. You can put some points into health to hit that 17k mark if you want to. It's really up to you how comfortable you feel with your character. Stamina tunes are a little bit squishier because you don't have access to a shield, and you're also in melee range, giving you less time to react to mechanics, so do keep that in mind. You might want to put some points into health to hit 17k health. For our Mundus, we'll be going with the Warrior. You can use the Lover. It all depends on what sort of debuff sets your group is running. If you are running, for example, Night Mother's Gaze, one person's running Night Mother's Gaze, another another person's running Thunder Flame, you have Alkosh in the group, you have Stamplar using Power of the Light, then you can go with Warrior and not have to worry about penetration, but if you're the only stamina in the group, then it might be worth using the Lover instead of the Warrior to hit that penetration cap of 18,000. Going over our skills, ours is our front bar, Killer's Blade, Surprise Attack, Deadly Cloak, Relentless Focus, and Blood Craze. Our ultimate's going to be Incapacitating Strike. And for our back bar, Razor Caltrops, Poison Injection, Endless Hail, Leeching Strikes, Rearming Trap, and Flawless Dawnbreaker. Now there's two routes you can go with ultimates. This is the route that I found to be most consistent, which is you have Incapacitating Strike as your main ultimate and you keep Flawless Dawnbreaker on the back bar to increase weapon damage while you're on this bar. The other option is to put Dawnbreaker on the front bar here, since you're going to be on this bar the most, and then have Ballista on the back bar and use Ballista instead as your main ultimate. However, based on my testing, Incapacitating Strike on the front and Flawless Dawnbreaker on the back gives you higher DPS. Going over our champion points, you have 230 to put into each of the three categories. Starting with the green CP, 75 in Tenacity, 75 in Mooncalf. These next 80 points you can put in these next three slots however you'd like. I have 26 in Tumbling, 28 in Shadow Ward, and 26 in Warlord. You want to conserve as much stamina as you can, so whenever you're block casting or have to break free, those points will help you out. I have 40 in Master at Arms, 56 in Mighty, 56 in Precise Strikes, 56 in Thaumaturge, and 22 in Piercing. Again, this is kind of going to vary based on the type of sets that your group is going to be running. If you're the only stamina DPS in the group, you might want to put a few more points into Piercing to make sure that you hit the cap. This particular setup is assuming that you have Alkosh, or not Alkosh, assuming you have Night Mother's Gaze and Infused Torix Crusher. You don't have Alkosh, you don't have Thunder Flame, and you don't have, or you do have a Stamplar providing Power of the Light, or a healer providing Power of the Light. So that's where this value comes from. If you are going to start taking points out of the other nodes and putting them into Piercing, start with Precise Strikes, then move over to Thaumaturge or Master at Arms. You want to touch Mighty last because Mighty affects all of your abilities versus Precise Strikes and Thaumaturge and Master at Arms, which only affects critical strikes and damage over time and direct damage. For our red CPs, you can play around with this depending on the content you run. You can shift CP points around. This current configuration is kind of a one-size-fits-most. 61 in Ironclad, 1 in Medium Armor Focus, 56 in Thick-Skinned, 56 in Hardy, and 56 in Elemental Defender. Again, you can play around with that depending on the content you're running. For example, if you know you're going to be taking more physical damage, for example on Hellra Citadel, you could take some points out of Elemental Defender and put it into Hardy. For our potions, make sure to be running Essence of Weapon Power, Major Brutality, Major Savagery, and Major Endurance. When your alchemy is up to 50 and you have maxed out your medicinal use passive, you'll be able to maintain those 3 buffs for the entire fight as long as you keep using your potions on cooldown. These potions are created using Dragonthorn, Blessed Thistle, and Wormwood. So we're going to go ahead now and start our Parse. Remember, this is a 3 million dummy Parse, so in an actual raid scenario, your Parse might be lower, might be higher, depending on the buffs you're getting, the debuffs on the enemy, as well as the mechanics of the fight. One thing to also keep in mind is that Nightblades, Stamina Nightblades in particular, are very good for what's called dummy humping, and that's because we have an innate source of Major Fracture. Surprise Attack does give us Major Fracture, so that does artificially boost our DPS on a 3 million dummy compared to other stamina classes that do not have a source of Major Fracture, such as Stamina Sorcerers or Stamina Templars. So do keep that in mind when we take apart our Parse at the end. We're going to go ahead and get started now in 3, 2, and 1. There we have it, a 41.2k parse on the Stamina Nightblade. Again, do keep in mind, we do have our own source of major fracture, so if you're trying to compare this parse with a Stamplar or a, for example, Stamina Sorcerer, those two classes don't have innate sources of major fracture, so our parse is going to be slightly inflated, our solo parse at least, just because we have a source of major fracture. So go ahead and looking over our parse here, this is kind of what you can expect to see. Stamina Nightblades are particularly difficult to play, mostly due to Assassin's Scourge, which comes from, not Unrelenting Focus, not called Unrelenting Focus. Yes, it is, Relentless Focus. So if we go back to our parse here, Assassin's Scourge, you see there, does make up a significant portion of our DPS. In order to get this to proc off Relentless, you need to weave 5 light attacks or heavy attacks during the duration of the ability. You can proc it multiple times. As you saw in my parse, I was trying to get 2 procs out of each time I cast Relentless Focus. That's kind of what you should be shooting for, 2 procs. You can see there the hits that I'm getting with the Assassin's Scourge are very high, about as high as the Execute actually. So this is the main reason why Stamina Nightblades are particularly difficult to play. You need to be very good with your light weaving so you can get those 2 procs per activation of Relentless Focus. Now it is possible to go even higher and get 3 procs, but that requires a lot of fandangling, a lot of playing around and moving things around. So 2 is the number that you should be shooting for. If you're getting only 1 per activation, that means you need to work on your light attack weaving a little bit more. So that's it for this video. Hope this guide helps. I'll see you guys in the next dungeon.